right, everyone, and we're live. Welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Dom, where we help guide your tech journey one story at a time. So, hey there, tech explorers. I'm your host, Dominic Gomes. Today, we're going to be diving into everything in the tech universe, from mentorship to scaling your career. But before we kick off, a quick request for everyone here. The YouTube disclaimer: please like, comment, subscribe. Your support lets us know what we're doing right and what kind of content you want to see. So, let's jump into the conversation today. I've got a fantastic guest here, Anthony Spina, who works at Asana. We're actually coworkers. And so a little bit of context here. Anthony and I met back at Asana back in November when I started, and he's just been a great, knowledgeable friend and colleague getting me onboarded. He definitely helped me with the Jira Asana integration, which I'm very thankful for. But he's also recently started doing coaching and mentoring for a boot camp, which aligns a lot with what we talk on this show. Let's kick it off. Anthony, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, and how you got into this whole game.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dominic. Appreciate it. I am from New York City, born and raised, so out of Queens. Been here my entire life. So wasn't really in like the tech world, right, per se. Come from like a background of just like blue collar workers. So like first person getting into that space in the family. So it's kind of like difficult to do that. But from getting out of college, started off in CS, right, being a product expert, answering customer questions. Then moving into implementation, like knowing how to solve customers' problems and standing up. And then finally, solution engineering, where, selling the art of the possible to those customers.
Great. Well, I guess why don't we dive a little bit more into just even parts of your career, right? Like, because I was even looking at your LinkedIn too. So I'm saying not even just CS. It looks like you were also doing some financial services type stuff. Wall Street.
Yeah. Yes. So interned over at the stock exchange for a little bit for one of the brokers down there, and then went to Morgan Stanley, and then from there broke into like the tech space with CS.
Got it. And so breaking in there, how did you get even that first role into the CS world?
Yeah, it was interesting, right? So it was coming out of like, I kind of realized that finance was a pretty hard space to kind of break into. And from my standpoint, it was like, all right, well, do I want to spend the next 5 years doing something that I might enjoy, or do I want to actually do something that I will enjoy? So I knew like whatever I needed to do needed to be SaaS solution, whatever that was, right, at the time. So that's what I was looking for, and finally found a role that I was like, hey, apply. I applied and actually got the role, the position.
So even that, like, and this is, I'll just even ask this question because like when I started off, like I didn't even know what SaaS was. Like, what was your introduction to even finding out what this was and like, hey, I might be interested in this? Just research?
It was like finding like where everything was going at the time, right? Everything was moving off of like on-prem into like the cloud, right? So I was like, all right, well, how do I get from what I'm doing now? That's very, banking is very like on-prem. Everything has to be done inside of servers, etc. So there wasn't that exploration out of there or branching out. I think banking is finally doing that now, like in the 21st century. But yeah, finding that space was interesting. It was like, hey, this is a solution that's fully online. You don't need any servers. Just log in and start doing your work and inputting your information.
Yeah, I mean you had good foresight into that, right? Because it's like I always tell the story kind of how I started off, where I just got into sales when I graduated college, but I didn't really know much aside from that's how I got exposure to what Salesforce was, and that's kind of how I made a lot of my career, was just doing Salesforce stuff. But I started off doing one thing, which introduced me to something else. So it's interesting to hear how, because I'm even looking at your degree, right? You studied finance, so like when you originally like what was your original goal when you got that degree? Did you want to be like a Wall Street guy, or?
I did. Yeah. That was like, aspiration, right? So I guess I don't know, just coming from that like blue collar working class family, it's like, all right, well, how do I make money, right? Finance is the way to make money. So
Dude, it's like the movie Wall Street. It's
exactly.
literally, yeah.
You go to school to study finance or accounting to make money and break into that industry, and then you're supposed to make millions of dollars, right? But it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. I've heard like the barrier of entry to even get into that. It's tough.
Yeah,
It's
you don't make that money until like you're like IB or global sales, or there's like top tier folks that can do that.
I mean, it's good though that you sort of recognize that maybe it wasn't for you like early, because we hear stories, we talk to people that go down a path and then they just feel like they're stuck. So again, great to see that you had the foresight. And so like you applied to a role, you got a customer support job, right? Starting out. And then you moved into implementation. How was that transition from, just, answering tickets and helping people out sort of from a break fixed capacity to, all right, I'm going to set this all up for you?
Yeah, it was actually pretty easy because I've like put myself into like a niche space. It was like corporate real estate, right? Or basically like setting up plans for like floor plans for office buildings and office space. So it was a pretty like niche market. So there weren't that many tools out there to like do what we were doing then. So from going to CS to implementation was pretty easy. It was just knowing that product really, really well, and then telling the users like when you're implementing them how you should set this up based off what you've seen in the past. So I already had that 2 years of experience of like, okay, well, this is what works, this is what doesn't work, this is where most of the pains are coming from like our customers, and like just avoiding that altogether and just showing them like this is how you should actually set your environment up.
Yeah. And my guess is, and just even keep me honest here, but I feel like, because I have a same background where I'm so used to implementing things. Do you ever find it that it's easy to overthink things because you try to figure out how everything works?
Yeah, I actually have that problem now. It's like, well, what happens if this goes here and you do this with this, and you just like kind of like psych yourself out with doing that.
You get too into the weeds. Like I was doing that yesterday. I was on a call with someone, and it was funny enough about the Jira integration, and you're just like, I got to test this out.
Does this actually work? Can you do this?
Does this work this way? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, I get that. And I think it's pretty common to see people go that route where, like, we always tell people, and there's a lot of folks here that have taken boot camps too. And normally you see that the path is someone either has sales experience, or they're coming from sort of like a maybe not like a technology background, but they've done, either customer support or they've done implementation and things like that. So it's pretty pertinent too. Like your journey is, it's pretty similar to mine too. Funny enough, like looking at your background, I'm like looking at your LinkedIn. I'm like, yeah, I didn't do support, but I did go sort of like a route where basically I did implementation for a long time. So let's talk more about like, okay, so where was the opportunity to finally be like, all right, I'm going from post to pre?
Yeah. So first thing, I think when you said like, hey, I came out of college looking at sales or going into a sales role. So I felt the complete opposite of like what you felt. I felt coming out of college with a degree, like I was above sales, right? Like why don't even look at, I'm not even gonna look at a sales position. I don't care about sales. Sales is like a word I don't even want to like put in my vocabulary, right? So that was like my thought process there too. I don't know why. It's just, I don't know. You get like car salesman type vibes, or you have that. I had that in my head, and it's not the right perception.
No. A lot of people, I've heard the same thing before. It's common. People think of the snake oil salesman. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. That was like the first, I think, downfall of like my career path there.
having expectations of what it was going to be, and it ends up being something completely different. Yeah,
exactly.
no,
100%.
it happens all the time. But yeah, no, like let's like what sort of was that first stop? Because I think the problem, and I've talked with a lot of folks that come from post sales, right? And
Okay.
a lot of times it's like, well, how do I get that first sort of role that allows me to try it out? You know, and what was it? Was it at your company, or did you find it, or did you apply for it, or what
Yeah,
happened?
I applied for it. So I applied for a so it was a solutions architect role, but it wasn't really a solutions architect role. It was more of like what we do now, like a solution engineer. I think it was just like for the title, like a solutions
Mm-hmm.
architect. But yeah, the reason I left implementation was it just kind of got like, monotonous every single day, doing the same thing, status updates on stuff that's not changing anytime soon, working with the same customer over and over again. And I kind of just like I just like hated what I was doing. And I was like, I just need to make some sort of change, right? I just gotta get out of here. Um, I was looking for like what that next step was. And it kept coming up like solution engineer, solution architect. And I'm just like, I'm not an engineer. I don't know like why these roles keep popping up. Like I don't know, coding or how to code things, etc. So my perception there was like, okay, I need to be like super, super technical. But then I started, reading some articles on it and realized that, it wasn't as technical as I thought it was going to be. And I just started to throw my resume out and found finally someone in the actual real estate space, SaaS real estate space, contacted me and was like, hey, we know that you worked with these other companies. We want you to come on board to help sell, our new solution that we just, got to market or came to market.
Well, we bring up another good point, right? Where I tell this a lot to folks and our viewers is that, if you want to break into pre-sales and say you don't have the pre-sales experience, lean on what you know. And
Mhm.
you knew a space, right? You knew the commercial real estate world and how to sell those, or maybe not sell, but you knew the domain.
Right.
So, I always tell people, if you're coming from a background of healthcare, look for healthcare solutions or companies that have verticals that focus on healthcare, because you have to sound credible. It's like the same, like if you were going to try to sell the financial services, the lingo there, right?
Yeah.
AUMs and and all this stuff, right? Like it all comes down to, you don't have to necessarily have the experience per
Mhm.
se, but you need to know how to talk the talk.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's kind of what allowed me to break into this solution architect role at that company. Like, hey, we know that you have this background experience. Come on board. And it was also a very new company too. So I think that was another aspect there, because I think if it was a more advanced team, I don't think I would have been able to get on or pass, requirements to get in.
Yeah, and another good point we mentioned to folks too is look at startups or
Mhm.
smaller companies, because they're more willing to give you those chances. And if you really have a higher level aspiration to work for the Googles, Microsofts, and Salesforces, it doesn't mean you have to go directly to them. There's a way to get there if you want to.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's
Yeah. So then, okay, so now we both work at Asana. So how did it all work out with Asana? Did you apply? Did they reach out to you? What brought us both to the same company?
So before becoming a solution engineer, during the implementation, I was actually helping Asana implement our software at Asana. And I
That's
was
awesome.
I was working with one of the head facility people at Asana, and we were just talking, having a conversation. And I think it was like during Christmas when he was like, hey, let's like pick this up during like the new year, because I'm off for like the next 2 weeks. We just get 2 weeks off during during like the Christmas, New Year's holiday. I was like, what? I was like, you guys get 2 weeks off for just the holidays? And he's like, yeah, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I think I want to work. I think I want to work there eventually. I don't know what I want to do there, but how do I get to Asana? Pretty much.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You had a great impression. You were just like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
I wanna potentially come here too and experience those. I always describe this to folks when they're looking at like tech companies, because Asana is a West Coast Bay Area tech company, right? And there's always a bunch of competition, right, for these types of perks to get like people to come. But like, it's like I'm very well aware that I live sort of like in a bubble in terms of like tech jobs and
Mhm.
stuff. Like you see how Google has crazy stuff where they'll do your dry cleaning and things like that. But then you talk to other folks and you realize like that doesn't exist everywhere else in the country. I know there's places in New York that do it. It's probably not as much as you'd probably see here though.
Yeah, it was honestly like a not only that, they were like, oh, I was also talking to Parker and he was like, I was like, oh, what do you guys use for like work management and stuff? Because I'm trying to figure out how to manage all these projects. He's like, oh, we actually use Asana at Asana. And we have this whole like culture here. I was like, wow, that's actually pretty cool. I respect that you're using your own solution to do your work.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's a cool story of how you made the move here. So okay, so like now you're at Asana. You've been here for about 2 years. What's it
Mhm.
like going from that? I would say, and again, I'm still trying to figure this out too. That commercial domain real estate to like Asana is basically applicable to pretty much anything.
Yeah, it was definitely a shock, right? Because you're going from like a very like niche market to anything under an organization, like, sales, finance, accounting, facilities, everything all in one. So that was definitely a huge jump. The other huge jump was, you know, when you're in like that, I was only in the solution architect role for like a year. So I was still I'm still learning how to sell, but it was a big shift in like mindset of, you're telling someone how to use a product before to showing them or telling them or showing them the value of that product, right? So how do I stop telling you how to do something and show like, hey, listen, if you purchase this, this is why you're going to save XYZ, or this is how much time you're going to save by doing this. And that's something I'm still like trying to get my hands around. I think at some points, because I do find myself going back to telling people how to like do things rather than why they should be doing things.
I, I think it's tough, right? Because it also depends on the audience. Every sale is different. Some people need that, and some people just, frankly, it sounds crazy. Some people just want to see product. Like, not to say that we should lead with that, but sometimes it is to move something forward. Like you literally like, hey, well, let me just show you this quick so you can kind of get a sense of it. Maybe you're not doing a full blown. I'm
Yeah.
showing everything, but I always look at all these things as tools in a toolbox, and you have to
Mhm.
use them when it makes sense. Like we have debates on this a lot around like, what about the disco demo? And like I think depending on the situation, it calls for it. If you're just hitting a brick wall with them just not even understanding why you're asking the questions you're asking.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, no. So that's great. So you've been here, at Asana for 2 years, doing really well. Like I said, I feel like you know the product super well. Like like I said, I look at you as one of those guys, and I'm not just saying that because like we're on
Oh,
a
please.
podcast.
No.
Yeah, but like, what's sort of your longer term dreams going down this track with pre-sales? Like, what's your ultimate? I don't want to say ultimate goal, but what are you looking for in the next 4 to 5 years? Is it to move up to different types of verticals or management, or like what do you how do you see your career progressing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's something I've been like not struggling with, but trying to figure out like what I want to do. And there's like almost like two routes, right? There's always like that manager route that you always want to go down, but at the same time, I don't want to lose that connection with like customers, right? Because I still love that engagement of like selling to people, even though you hated it in the past. Now I love actually selling the product to people and like seeing like their face like when they get it, like, oh wow, this is it. Um, but at the same time, I enjoy actually mentoring folks, and seeing and just showing them, not only like Asana, but like how to do things or how to make themselves better. Um, and I actually started doing that, I think, a year ago internally at Asana. So I was a mentor for, I think, one or two solution engineers that were onboarded. And then from there, I actually expanded out to like the broader Asana, where I've helped onboard like new Asanas to from any department in the organization, like running 101 classes, 102 classes, like how to use the platform, how you should be practicing using it. I've actually enjoyed that, and thanks to you, right? You actually brought me into like that fold of the pre-sales academy, where I can actually continue doing that externally outside of work, and actually help give that forward to new solution engineers or solution engineers in the making.
So how's that experience been working with Pre-Sales Academy?
It's been really good. Like I love it, honestly. I think it's brought a different aspect of like what an SE should be doing or could be doing, to life for me, where you're not just you don't have to just worry about like ARR or making the next deal. It's like, how do you like improve everyone's experience doing whatever they love to do? Like if it's PMM, if it's product, if it's sales, if it's marketing, how can we help all those folks? But yeah, I think I went off topic there. Sorry.
No. You're seeing basically the role in a different lens, is what you're trying to tell me.
Right. Exactly.
And also, do you find it like, and again, maybe I might be leading the witness here. Do you find that when you're trying to teach what you know, you think about how you do things a little bit differently?
I do. Yeah. No. 100%.
Yeah. Like you might even be questioning. There's been some times where I'm giving someone advice and then I'm kind of questioning, like, where did I get this idea? How did I come to this sort of conclusion? And I do that a lot when I talk with the people that I'm mentoring in PSA, of like, and then they even ask me like, why is that? And then you start asking yourself, you're like, that's a good question. I just feel like that's what I've come to know. But it also kind of helps you question some of your preconceived notions about the role, but as well as just even tech in general. Because I always look at, when you're looking at the mentorship aspect, a lot of these people, it's not even just you're mentoring them around how to get into pre-sales, but some of these people like just don't know how the tech industry works too as well. And it's kind of like what you mentioned with finance, where there's lingos and there's things that people understand or know, and you're assumed to know it. It's the same thing in tech. Like the amount of acronyms are kind of insane. Like you could have a PM and a PMM, and like an SE, but there's an SWE, there's SEOT or SDET. Like and a lot of people, it's hard to really sort of express what the bigger picture is, because it's like the pre-sales aspect of it is really just one part of it.
Yeah.
Where if you don't understand the product development lifecycle, sales, and how a customer is supported, like you're not going to get the whole picture.
Yeah, and I think that's what I would like recommend, right? Understanding that entire picture first before diving into it, because I think it just makes it a lot easier. Like knowing the use cases before actually knowing the product to an extent.
Totally. Yeah. Because the product is a tool, right? If it doesn't have an application to a pain or doing something, like ultimately at the end of the day, it's what is the user doing and how's it going to make their life better?
Right.
And if you can't answer those questions, then what's the product really for?
Yeah. And to your point earlier, when you were saying like, hey, I've seen a lot of folks coming from, CS or implementation, like in the pre-sales collective, I've actually seen a lot academy. I've seen a lot of folks from like teaching backgrounds come in, which is really interesting. So I was like,
oh, wow. Yeah. That one of the people I'm mentoring was same thing. She's a teacher, and she, you start explaining stuff. Like I try to explain like how the game works in tech, right? Like it's, normally you spend a certain amount of time and you see people a lot, like it's not like the tech industry is so fluid. Like it's very common to see people jumping around a lot, right? Like it's kind of how it goes. And people don't get that concept a lot of times. They kind of think like, well, if I'm a teacher, and I stay at, a school for 10 years or something like that. But, to the same token, right? It's also, it's a great market, but also like, it has its I wouldn't say downsides, but there's uncertainty, right? Like there's been a lot of layoffs that have happened in a lot of companies this year. So, there is sort of, you are getting potentially good earnings potential, but sometimes like you are potentially getting into like, like an industry that can be a little bit volatile too as well. And so you have to explain that to people. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And like, even for my career, right, it's 10 years or 10 years plus, like 6-7 roles or 6-7 different positions. And my parents are always like, are you okay, are you doing all right? Like, why are you jumping around from job to job? It's like, well, you kind of have to if you want to keep growing.
Yeah, I have a similar background, right, where either you're making changes to progress responsibilities and titles, or you might even get in situations, right, where just it's not that you're doing bad or you dislike your current job at a place, but it's like you hit a point where it's like there's no growth,
Right?
And likewise, you could be doing great things. Like I have people who I've talked to that were doing great in their career, and it's just like, hey, the company does a reduction in force, or people, for viewers out there, you'll hear the term riff, and they're just a name on a spreadsheet, and it wasn't anything that they did wrong. It's just like the company changed, and that's unfortunately how it is sometimes. But yeah, no, I get it. I think that's the thing. A lot of folks, just if they're not coming in from the tech industry or seeing what the background is, like it's a lot of opportunities, but also like, sometimes it can be a little nerve wracking, right? Like
It's true. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I agree. I still remember that day here at Asana when we had those layoffs. So that was an interesting day. It was a Tuesday. I still remember.
Yeah, no, I've seen it at a number of companies I've worked at too as well, where one day you're working with someone and they're like, oh, they're not there anymore, and you're like, wow, that's
you check the Slack and it's deactivated. I'm like, hey, what's going on here?
No, totally. Yeah, but on the brighter side, right? Like I think, like I said, when that happens to folks, like people land on their feet. Always hoping for people to land on their feet. And the great thing is, you get skills that other companies are gonna want. And I think right now, right, with I still am bullish that things will start picking up, like later this year, next year. I think AI is going to open up a lot of interesting roles, especially for people in pre-sales, because you're going to need people to know how to sell what AI can do.
Right.
Yeah. So always be learning, as I always tell folks, and try to figure out what the cutting edge is. And it doesn't mean you have to be like a Python expert and learn deep AI, ML, machine learning skills or anything like that. But if you want to, by all means, go ahead, viewers.
You can.
Sorry about that. Well, cool. Well, like aside from like when you're doing your mentorship, I was kind of curious, what are the main things that you're teaching or conveying to your mentees?
So I think it's just keep it simple is one of them, right? I think you can get lost in trying to learn a product, and you can just start again explaining rather than like showing and telling. So I think that's like one of the main ones. Another one is like just relax, keep it easy, take it easy, right? I think because you get like very, very nervous, thinking that when you're giving like an interview, not an interview, when you're giving like a demo, that the other person on the line is a product expert, right? But they're not. Like what you know, and that person probably doesn't know anything. So just keep it in your head, like, I know more than this person. And what I'm showing them is going to like land, or hopefully will land. But those are, I think, the two main things.
I like your second point a lot, because you're right. It's easy to get in your own head thinking like, oh, they're going to call BS on what I'm showing.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, this guy's a sales guy and he's just trying to,
Exactly.
but a lot of times, right? Like, and I think I tell this to folks too, like when you're onboarding typically at a company and they make you do those mock demos, those are normally harder than most customer calls.
100%.
Always, because they're going to like try to intentionally throw you off. Most customers don't know what they don't know, which is exactly what you just said.
Yeah. I actually failed my intro, my 202 demo here at Asana, because it was just like very nerve-wracking. You're on the phone with, your manager, another sales engineer, or another 2 sales engineers, and you're just talking and you can just see it in their face. Like, really? Is that what we do here? I'm just like, oh.
You can, yeah. Well, I mean, it happens. Like I had to redo mine at Zendesk, I believe, at some point, or I was getting very close to doing it, and then like I had to spend more time because I was doing too much.
You just psych yourself out. Psych yourself out.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you're your own worst enemy, and I feel like that's a common thread I talk to sales engineers and solution engineers about. Is like, we're all really self-critical, man.
Oh, I think so.
But yeah, no, like I said, I think you're doing good things here with the PSA, but also just in Asana in general. But yeah, no, like I think like we'll get close to wrapping this up, but just kind of like leaving with any parting thoughts, Anthony, like what would if you had like the top 3 things you would want to tell someone right now that's looking to break into tech, what would you tell them?
I think, well, don't get into your own head, right? Just apply to whatever positions out there. I think that you can do basically whatever you want to do as long as you're willing to put the time into it. I think anyone can do any role. I don't know about development or like, engineering, but I think that's next level. But I think anything else, like if you put the time into it, you learn it, you can speak that lingo. I think that you'll be able to break into that space. And then the other one is, for those like coming out of college, you are not above sales. Sales is actually a really good place. And I unfortunately learned that later in my career when I should have learned that a little bit earlier in my career.
That's yeah. No, I think those are all great points. Okay, closing it up here, like how can our viewers get in touch with you if they want to connect?
Yeah, you can reach out to my LinkedIn, send a message, or even shoot me an email if needed.
Perfect. All right. Well, all right, everyone. Well, again, please make sure to like, share this with your network, subscribe, and join us every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific for these episodes. And comment below and let us know what your favorite tip from our guest was today. Thanks again, Anthony, for the time.
Thanks, Dominic. Appreciate it.